My name is Cruz 65 years old, and I never thought my own daughter would betray me this way. After losing Sarah, my wife of 42 years, I moved in with Amanda, thinking it would heal our relationship. Instead, I discovered how little she valued everything I had sacrificed for her. When she demanded rent from me, she had no idea I still owned the house she thought was hers. The look on her face when eviction came after I sold it still haunts me. If you have ever been taken for granted by someone you love, please hit the like button, subscribe, and share where you are watching from. This story might just change how you think about family. I was born in a small town outside of Detroit to hardworking parents who taught me the value of every dollar. By the time I was 16, I was already working construction jobs after school, learning skills that would later become my livelihood. I met Sarah during my second year of community college. She was studying to become a teacher, her eyes bright with dreams of shaping young minds. We fell in love quickly, married young at 23, and built our life together brick by brick. In the early days, we rented a tiny one-bedroom apartment that barely fit our second-hand furniture. Sarah taught at the local elementary school, while I worked my way up from construction worker to site manager. We saved every penny we could. Nights were spent at our rickety kitchen table, counting dollars and planning for a future that seemed so far away. Our daughter Amanda came along 3 years into our marriage. The moment I held her, my entire world shifted. This tiny human with Sarah's eyes and my stubborn chin became the center of our universe. We wanted to give her everything neither of us had growing up. Perhaps that was our first mistake. When Amanda was 7, my hard work paid off. I was offered a partnership in the construction company. The increased salary meant we could finally look for a house of our own. After months of searching, we found it. A 4-bedroom colonial with a large backyard on Maple Street. At $175,000, it stretched our budget to the absolute limit, but Sarah and I agreed it would be worth it. A stable home for Amanda, room to grow, and a neighborhood with excellent schools. I remember the day we signed the mortgage papers. Sarah squeezed my hand under the table, and we exchanged glances that said more than words ever could. This was our American dream coming true, built on countless overtime hours and careful saving. As Amanda grew, so did our desire to provide her with opportunities. Dance lessons, summer camps, private tutoring when she struggled with math. Nothing was too good for our daughter. Sarah made sure Amanda had the newest clothes for school. I worked extra weekends to pay for her first car at 16. We never wanted her to face the hardships we had overcome. Despite our efforts to teach her gratitude, I noticed troubling signs as Amanda entered her teenage years. The thank yous became less frequent. Her expectations grew. The designer jeans we bought were never quite right. The car we provided not quite new enough. Sarah would gently remind her of how fortunate she was, while I often bit my tongue, not wanting to be the bad guy. Amanda was bright and did well enough in school to get accepted to State University. We had saved for her education since her birth, another sacrifice we made willingly. During college, Amanda met Tom Bradley, a business major with an easy smile and ambitious plans. They married a year after graduation, and at first, I was happy for them. Tom came from money, and while I occasionally worried about his spending habits, I hoped he would provide well for my daughter. Sarah and I settled into a comfortable routine as empty nesters. I continued working, now as a senior manager overseeing multiple construction projects. Sarah devoted more time to her garden and book club. We downsized to a smaller place, a 2-bedroom condo closer to the city, keeping the house on Maple Street as an investment property that we rented out. When Amanda was 32, she and Tom decided they wanted to buy a house in our old neighborhood. Property values had risen significantly, and they were struggling to find something in their price range. After much discussion, Sarah and I made a decision that seemed right at the time. We would transfer the Maple Street house to Amanda as an early inheritance. The renter's lease was ending, and the timing seemed perfect. Our attorney, Frank Lambert, advised us to maintain partial ownership through a living trust, transferring 70% to Amanda while keeping 30% in our names until I reached 70. It was a way to minimize estate taxes and provide some protection. Amanda and Tom were overjoyed and moved in immediately, promising to make wonderful new memories there. Life continued peacefully until Sarah was diagnosed with breast cancer. What followed was 3 years of treatments, hope, disappointment, and finally acceptance. Sarah fought bravely, never complaining even on her worst days. During this time, Amanda visited occasionally, always seeming rushed. Tom rarely came at all. When Sarah passed away, I felt as though half of myself had died with her. For 51 years, we had faced life together. Now, at 63, I was alone for the first time. The condo felt empty, haunted by memories of Sarah in every corner. I tried to stay busy with volunteer work and coffee with old friends, but the loneliness was overwhelming. 6 months after Sarah died, Amanda called with what seemed like a thoughtful suggestion. Why was I rattling around alone in the condo? The grandchildren, Jackson and Lily, now 10 and 7, missed having me around. There was plenty of room at their house. Why not sell the condo and move in with them? I was touched by the offer. Perhaps Amanda had recognized my loneliness. Maybe this was her way of reconnecting after being somewhat distant during Sarah's illness. I agreed almost immediately, looking forward to being closer to family, and particularly to my grandchildren, who were growing up so fast. What I did not tell Amanda was that I still partially owned the house she thought was entirely hers. Sarah and I had never gotten around to transferring the remaining 30%. After her death, I simply let things be, assuming it would all go to Amanda eventually anyway. It seemed an unnecessary detail to bring up during what I thought would be a new chapter of family togetherness. How wrong I was. Selling my condo was surprisingly easy in the hot real estate market. I cleared nearly $300,000 after paying off the remaining mortgage. I put most of it into my retirement accounts, but kept about $50,000 in a checking account for emergencies and to help Amanda and Tom if needed. Moving day was filled with optimism. Amanda had cleared out their guest room for me, and I arrived with just my clothes, some books, and boxes of photographs and mementos from my life with Sarah. I had sold or donated most of my furniture, wanting to take up as little space as possible in their home. Tom helped carry my boxes upstairs, chatting enthusiastically about having me join their household. Amanda had prepared my favorite meal for dinner, pot roast with potatoes and carrots, just like Sarah used to make. That first evening, sitting around their dining table with my daughter, son-in-law, and grandchildren felt right. For the first time since Sarah died, I felt the warmth of family surrounding me again. Jackson and Lily were thrilled to have their grandfather living with them. Jackson immediately wanted to show me his collection of baseball cards, and Lily insisted I read her a bedtime story. These simple moments filled the empty spaces in my heart. I was determined to be helpful, not a burden. The next morning, I was up early preparing breakfast for everyone. Amanda seemed pleasantly surprised to find pancakes waiting when she came downstairs. That first week set a pattern. I would make breakfast, see the kids off to school with Amanda, then spend my day doing small repairs around the house. The place needed quite a bit of work. The dishwasher leaked slightly. Several windows needed resealing, and the backyard had become overgrown since Sarah was no longer there to tend her beloved garden. I took pleasure in these tasks, feeling useful and connected to the home Sarah and I had once shared. In the afternoons, I would be there when the school bus dropped off Jackson and Lily. While Amanda worked part-time at a local real estate office, I helped the kids with homework and started dinner preparations. Tom usually arrived home around 6, often bringing expensive bottles of wine or gourmet food items. I noticed their refrigerator was stocked with specialty products from high-end stores. Their kitchen had been remodeled with top-of-the-line appliances, and both Amanda and Tom drove luxury cars less than 2 years old. At first, family dinners were a joy. We shared stories about our days. I told the grandchildren tales about their mother as a child, making them giggle. Tom would talk about his work in investment banking, though I noticed he often glossed over details when I asked specific questions. After dinner, Amanda or Tom would clean up while I spent quality time with the grandchildren. Jackson was interested in building things, reminding me of myself at his age. I started teaching him basic woodworking in the garage. Lily loved to draw and would sit for hours, creating colorful pictures of our family while I watched admiringly. On weekends, we sometimes took outings together, a trip to the zoo, a picnic in the park, or a movie matinee. These were the times I treasured most. Seeing my grandchildren experience simple pleasures with the same wonder I had seen in Amanda's eyes decades earlier. Without drawing attention to it, I began covering many household expenses. I would do the grocery shopping, buy the kids new clothes when needed, and pay for family meals out. I wanted to contribute, to show my appreciation for being welcomed into their home. If Amanda or Tom noticed, they never mentioned it. One evening, about 3 weeks after I moved in, I overheard Amanda and Tom discussing finances in their bedroom. Their door was ajar, and as I passed on my way to the bathroom, Tom's frustrated voice caught my attention. "The credit card bill is nearly $8,000 this month, Amanda. This cannot continue. The furniture for the living room was on sale. We needed it. And my shopping trip with Jennifer was planned months ago. Between the second mortgage, car payments, and the kids' private school tuition, we are stretched thin, very thin." Second mortgage? This was news to me. Sarah and I had paid off the original mortgage years ago, before transferring the house to Amanda. They must have taken out a new loan against the property. I quietly continued to the bathroom, troubled by what I had heard but hesitant to intrude on their private financial matters. Still, I made a mental note to be even more generous with household expenses. As weeks turned into months, our routine continued pleasantly enough on the surface, yet I began noticing subtle changes. Amanda would sometimes sigh when I suggested a family activity. Tom spent more time working late or going out with colleagues. The grandchildren were increasingly enrolled in after-school programs that limited our time together. Yet there were still beautiful moments that gave me hope. Helping Lily plant a small flower garden in memory of her grandmother, teaching Jackson to fix his bicycle, the warm smile Amanda gave me when I surprised her with tickets to a Broadway show she had mentioned wanting to see. I felt I was building a new kind of relationship with my daughter as adults, one based on mutual respect and shared love for her children. I was also finding purpose in being useful, in transferring knowledge to my grandchildren, in supporting my daughter and her husband through what I assumed were temporary financial difficulties. If only I had recognized the warning signs sooner. By the 4th month of living with Amanda and her family, subtle shifts in atmosphere became impossible to ignore. The morning routines remained consistent, but there was a newfound tension over breakfast. Amanda would check her watch repeatedly, rushing the children, while Tom buried himself in his phone, barely acknowledging my carefully prepared meals. One Tuesday morning, after everyone had left, I noticed a shopping bag Amanda had forgotten. Inside was a designer blouse, with the price tag still attached, $480 for a single shirt. I carefully returned it to where I found it, but the discovery troubled me. If they were having financial difficulties, as I had overheard, such purchases seemed reckless. The home itself began to fill with new possessions. A 70-inch television appeared in the living room. Tom came home with a new set of golf clubs that he mentioned casually had cost nearly $2,000. Amanda's closet overflowed with shopping bags from boutiques whose names I did not recognize. Meanwhile, their complaints about household expenses increased. The water bill was too high. The electric company had raised rates again. The property taxes on the house were becoming unbearable. Each statement felt like an indirect criticism of my presence, though they never said so explicitly. I began to notice how Amanda would subtly redirect the grandchildren away from activities with me. "Grandpa is probably tired, Jackson. Why not play your video game instead?" Or, "Lily, leave Grandpa alone. He doesn't want to hear about your school project right now." Despite my protests that I was never too tired for them, These interventions increased. Small criticisms of my contributions to the household started to emerge. The chicken I prepared was too dry. I had loaded the dishwasher incorrectly. My morning coffee brewing woke them too early. The garden shed where I kept my tools was cluttering the backyard view. I tried addressing these concerns directly. Amanda, if something is bothering you about the living arrangement, we should discuss it openly. Everything is fine, Dad, she would say with a tight smile that did not reach her eyes. We are just adjusting to having someone else in our space. Our space. Not your childhood home that your mother and I provided. Not the house I still partially owned. Our space, from which I was increasingly made to feel separate. The situation worsened dramatically in the 6th month when Tom lost his job. He came home early one afternoon, his face pale and drawn. The investment firm was downsizing, and his position had been eliminated. He would receive 3 months of severance pay. But after that, their income would be reduced to Amanda's part-time real estate commissions. That evening I offered to help financially. I have savings and Social Security. I can increase my contribution to the household until Tom finds a new position. Amanda accepted with a quick, "That would be helpful, Dad," but I detected no real gratitude. Tom said nothing, his pride visibly wounded. What confused me most was that despite this financial setback, their spending did not decrease. If anything, it accelerated, as if they were trying to maintain appearances. Amanda bought a new watch. Tom upgraded his phone. They continued dining out at expensive restaurants, now often without inviting me along. I began transferring $2,000 monthly into their account, labeling it household contribution to preserve Tom's dignity. This was substantially more than any reasonable rent would have been for my small bedroom, but I told myself it was what family does for each other. Sarah would have wanted me to help. The relationship with my grandchildren became my greatest concern. Jackson, now 11, was spending most of his time with friends or on electronic devices. When I suggested teaching him to build a birdhouse, he rolled his eyes and said, "That's boring, Grandpa." Lily still showed me her artwork, but increasingly did so hurriedly, before being called away by her mother for some seemingly urgent task. One evening, I overheard Amanda on the phone with a friend. Having Dad here is becoming a real strain. He means well, but he's constantly underfoot. Tom is irritated all the time now. We had plans for that guest room before Dad moved in, you know? Her words stung more than I cared to admit. Underfoot? In the home I had worked so hard to provide? The home where I had raised her? The home I still partially owned? As month 7 began, Tom remained unemployed, though he spoke vaguely of promising leads and networking opportunities that seemed to involve golf outings and expensive lunches. I continued providing financial support without comment, watching my savings diminish while their spending habits remained unchanged. The breaking point approached gradually. Then suddenly, like a storm that builds quietly before unleashing its fury. 9 months into our living arrangement, I decided to prepare a special dinner. It was Sarah's birthday, and though she was gone, I wanted to honor her memory with her favorite meal. I spent the afternoon making her signature lasagna recipe with homemade sauce that simmered for hours. I baked garlic bread from scratch and prepared a Caesar salad just the way she used to. For dessert, I made her famous apple pie with the flaky crust that had taken her years to perfect. I had mentioned my plans to Amanda earlier in the week, and she had nodded distractedly, saying they would try to be home on time. I set the dining table with care, using the good dishes, and even bought flowers for a centerpiece. I wanted this to be a moment for us to reconnect as a family, to remember Sarah together, to heal some of the growing distance between us. 7 o'clock came and went. No sign of Amanda, Tom, or the grandchildren. I kept the food warm, checking my phone occasionally for messages. Nothing. By 8:30, I had resigned myself to eating alone when I heard the garage door open. They bustled in carrying shopping bags, laughing about something. Jackson was wearing a brand new leather jacket. Lily clutched a box containing an expensive electronic tablet. Tom carried bags from high-end stores. Amanda followed with more packages. "Oh, Dad," she said, noticing me at the table. "I completely forgot about your dinner thing. We decided to go shopping and then grab burgers at that new place downtown. The one with the $30 hamburgers," Tom added with a laugh. "Worth every penny, though." I looked at the cooling food on the table, the unlit candles, the flowers I had carefully arranged. "It was your mother's birthday today," I said quietly. "I wanted us to remember her together." Amanda's expression flickered briefly with something that might have been guilt, quickly replaced by irritation. "You should have reminded me this morning. We already had plans." "Shopping plans," I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice, which seemed to be a priority despite Tom's employment situation. The room went silent. Tom's face darkened. "My employment situation is none of your concern." "It becomes my concern when I'm contributing $2,000 monthly to this household while watching you spend recklessly," I replied, surprising myself with my directness. Amanda slammed her shopping bags onto the counter. "We did not ask you to give us that money. That was your choice. A choice I made because you mentioned financial struggles. The second mortgage, the bills. I wanted to help, but I'm confused about the priorities here." "Our finances are our business," Tom interjected. "Your contribution is appreciated, but it doesn't give you the right to comment on our spending." I gestured to the packages. New jackets, electronics, designer clothes. "Are these necessities?" "We work hard," Amanda snapped. "We deserve nice things. Just because you and Mom lived frugally doesn't mean we have to." "Frugally?" I felt my temper rising. "We lived responsibly. We saved. We sacrificed to provide for you, to give you this very house. And we're grateful," Tom said in a tone that suggested anything but gratitude. "But times have changed. The economy is different now. The principles of living within your means haven't changed," I countered. Amanda crossed her arms. "Dad, I think we need to have a serious conversation about expectations. This arrangement isn't working as well as we hoped." "What does that mean?" I asked, though I suspected I knew. "It means," she said, her voice cold, "that if you want to continue living here, you need to contribute properly. $2,000 isn't enough for room and board in this neighborhood." I stared at her, disbelieving. "You want me to pay you rent? For staying in the house I bought? The house your mother and I gave you? This is our house now, Dad. Not yours and Mom's anymore. We have our own family, our own lives. If you want to be part of it, you need to pay your way. $3,000 a month seems fair, given the neighborhood values." The words struck me like physical blows. Our house. Pay your way. As if I were a stranger, not her father. Not the man who had worked 70-hour weeks for years to afford this home. Not the man who had given her everything, including this very roof over her head. "I see," was all I could manage. "You have a week to decide," Amanda continued, her voice businesslike. "Pay the rent or find somewhere else to live. We need to be practical here." Tom nodded in agreement. The grandchildren had slipped away upstairs during the argument, but I could see Jackson watching from the hallway, his expression troubled. "A week," I repeated numbly. "Yes," Amanda confirmed. "I think that's generous. Now, if you'll excuse us, we've had a long day." They left me sitting there at the table with Sarah's favorite meal growing cold. The memory of her birthday celebration shattered. I slowly began clearing the untouched food, wrapping portions for the refrigerator that I suspected would remain uneaten. That night, I lay awake in the guest room, surrounded by the few possessions I had kept after selling the condo. Photographs of Sarah and me through the years. The watch she had given me on our 40th anniversary. The small wooden box containing her wedding ring. Had I failed as a parent? Had providing too much created this sense of entitlement? Or had Amanda always had this capacity for coldness, and I had simply refused to see it? I thought about all the hours I had worked on construction sites, coming home with aching muscles and calloused hands, proud that I was building security for my family. I remembered Sarah and me sitting at our small kitchen table, calculating how to stretch our budget to include dance lessons for Amanda, braces for her teeth, the school trips she wanted to take. Somewhere between those sacrifices and this moment, something had gone terribly wrong. My daughter saw me, not as the father who had given everything, but as a tenant expected to pay premium rent for the privilege of being tolerated in what she now considered exclusively her home. What Amanda didn't know, what had never seemed important to mention until now, was that this house was not entirely hers. And that realization gave me both clarity and a profound sadness about what I needed to do next. The morning after our confrontation, I called Frank Lambert, the attorney who had handled our property transfer and Sarah's estate. His secretary recognized my voice and put me through immediately. Cruz, good to hear from you. How are things going with the living arrangement? Not well, Frank, I admitted. That's why I'm calling. I need to understand exactly what my legal position is regarding the house. There was a pause. You never completed the full transfer, Cruz. After Sarah passed, we discussed finalizing it, but you decided to wait. Currently, the property is still 70% in your name through the living trust, 30% in Amanda's. You are the majority owner. The confirmation brought me no joy, only certainty about what needed to happen. I'd like to meet with you today if possible, I said. Frank cleared his schedule for me, and 2 hours later, I sat in his wood-paneled office, explaining the situation. He listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly troubled. So Amanda has demanded rent from you, without realizing you still own most of the house, he summarized when I finished. Yes, $3,000 monthly, with 1 week to decide. Frank removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. Cruz, I know this is painful, but given what you've told me about their financial habits and the discovery of a second mortgage, selling the property might be the most prudent course of action. Selling? Although I had begun contemplating this possibility during my sleepless night, hearing it stated so plainly made my stomach tighten. The real estate market is extremely favorable right now. Properties in that neighborhood are selling above asking price, often with multiple offers. Based on recent comparables, your house could fetch around $800,000, possibly more. The figure stunned me. The home I had purchased for $175,000 was now worth nearly $1 million. In any other circumstance, this would have been cause for celebration. What about Amanda's 30% ownership? I asked. She would be entitled to 30% of the proceeds after the second mortgage is satisfied. But as majority owner, you have the legal right to initiate the sale. I stared out his office window at the city skyline. She'll never forgive me. Frank leaned forward. Cruz, from what you've described, Amanda and Tom are heading for financial disaster regardless. The second mortgage, the reckless spending despite unemployment. You enabling this by contributing your retirement savings won't change the inevitable outcome. It might actually be worse for them in the long run. Deep down, I knew he was right. If I continued supporting their lifestyle, my savings would eventually be depleted. Then what? Would I become truly homeless, having given everything to a daughter who valued none of it? I need to think about this, I said. That afternoon, I picked up Jackson and Lily from school as usual. On the drive home, I asked casual questions about their parents' plans. Mom says we might be moving to a bigger house soon, Lily volunteered. She showed me pictures of one with a swimming pool. Jackson nodded. Dad said once they fix their credit score thing, they can get a loan for the new house they want. That sounds exciting, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Would there be room for me in this new house? The children exchanged glances. Mom said you might be happier in a retirement community, Jackson finally answered. She showed us a brochure. It had a golf course and everything. I see, I said, my decision crystallizing. And what do you two think about that idea? I don't want you to go, Lily said immediately. Who would help me with my art projects? Jackson shrugged, trying to appear indifferent, but added, the birdhouse we started isn't finished yet. Their innocent responses confirmed what I needed to know. Plans were already in motion to remove me from their lives, regardless of my decision about the rent demand. That evening, I searched Amanda's home office, while the family was out at a movie they had not invited me to join. In the desk drawer, I found the brochures, Jackson had mentioned. Sunrise Meadows Retirement Community. The cheapest unit started at $2,000 monthly, with additional fees for meals and services. I also discovered papers for the second mortgage. They had borrowed $220,000 against the house, with a hefty interest rate reflecting poor credit scores. Monthly payments were nearly $3,000. No wonder they wanted that amount from me. Most disturbing was a folder containing printouts of luxury homes in exclusive neighborhoods, all priced well above what they could realistically afford. One was circled in red pen with "Our Next Home" written beside it. The asking price was $1.2 million. The evidence was clear. They had been planning to use me as a temporary source of income until they could somehow finance their next lifestyle upgrade. I, and my contributions to their lives, both past and present, were merely stepping stones to what they wanted next. That night, I wrote a letter to Amanda, explaining everything. My continued ownership of the house, my disappointment in her choices, my decision to sell the property. I wrote about Sarah, about our sacrifices, about the values we had tried to instill. I wrote about my love for her despite everything, and my hope that someday she would understand that this action was necessary. I sealed the letter in an envelope, but did not give it to her yet. There were preparations to make first. The next morning, I called Carol Davis, a realtor who had worked with my construction company on several projects. I explained the situation in confidence, and she agreed to handle the sale discreetly. Given the location and the current market, we should list at $795,000, she advised. That will likely generate multiple offers and a sale price well above asking. How quickly can we move on this? I asked. I can have a photographer there tomorrow, if you can ensure the family is out. We can list by the weekend, and I would expect offers within days, possibly hours in this market. Everything was moving faster than I had anticipated, but perhaps that was for the best. A clean break, like removing a bandage quickly. That afternoon, I rented a small furnished apartment in a complex across town, signing a 6-month lease. I arranged for a storage unit for the few possessions I would take with me. I visited my bank and ensured my finances were separate and secure. Throughout these preparations, I maintained my usual routine at Amanda's house. I cooked, I helped with the grandchildren, I fixed things that needed repair. No one noticed the sadness behind my smiles, or if they did, they chose not to mention it. Amanda had not brought up the rent ultimatum again, apparently assuming I was considering her demand. Tom barely spoke to me at all. Only the grandchildren provided moments of genuine connection, and I treasured each one, knowing they might be among our last. On Friday, while everyone was out, the real estate photographer came. The house looked beautiful in the pictures. Sunlight streaming through windows that Sarah had once hung curtains in, the garden I had maintained visible through the sliding doors, the kitchen where we had shared thousands of family meals gleaming with Amanda's expensive upgrades. By Saturday evening, the listing was live. By Sunday morning, Carol called to inform me that they had received 12 offers, the highest at $840,000, all cash, with a quick closing timeline. It was time to tell Amanda the truth. On Sunday evening, I asked Amanda and Tom if we could have a family meeting after the children went to bed. They exchanged glances, probably assuming I was going to agree to their rent demand. "Sure, Dad," Amanda said. "Around 9? At 9:15, we gathered in the living room. Amanda and Tom sat together on the sofa, while I took the armchair across from them. I had brought the sealed letter and a folder containing the sale documents. "I've made my decision regarding your request," I began. Amanda smiled slightly. "I'm glad to hear that. We were thinking we could start the new arrangement from the 1st of the month." "That won't be possible," I said calmly. "I've decided to move out." Tom nodded, unsurprised. "That's probably for the best. We can help you find a suitable place." "I've already found an apartment," I continued. "But there's something important you both need to know." I slid the folder across the coffee table toward them. "The house has been sold." There was a moment of absolute silence. Amanda's face went blank with confusion. "What do you mean, sold? This is our house." Actually, it's not. Not entirely. I explained the incomplete property transfer, my continued 70% ownership, and the sale that was now in progress. Amanda's face transformed from confusion to shock to rage in the span of seconds. You can't do this. This is our home. You gave it to us. I intended to, I acknowledged. But the transfer was never completed. After your mother died, it didn't seem important to finalize it. I assumed you would inherit my portion eventually anyway. Tom was frantically paging through the documents. This can't be legal. We've been living here for years. We've made improvements, paid the taxes. Frank can explain the legal details, I said. But yes, it's entirely legal. The buyers have offered $840,000, all cash. After paying off your second mortgage, which I only recently discovered, the proceeds will be divided according to our ownership percentages. Amanda jumped to her feet. You had no right. No right at all. This was meant to be our inheritance. It was, I agreed. Until you decided to treat me as a tenant rather than your father. Until you demanded rent from me for staying in the house I worked my entire life to provide. That was different, she sputtered. We have expenses, responsibilities, like designer clothes, luxury cars, plans for an even more expensive house. I kept my voice level. I found the brochures, Amanda, for the retirement home you planned to send me to, for the new mansion you wanted to buy. Tom had gone pale. You went through our private papers? Yes, I admitted. After learning you had been planning to move me out regardless of my decision about the rent, I needed to understand what was really happening here. Amanda was now crying, but they were tears of anger, not remorse. You've ruined everything. Where are we supposed to go? What about the children? The buyers have agreed to a 60-day closing period. You have 2 months to find a new place. Your share of the proceeds after the mortgage is paid will be approximately $180,000. That should be more than enough for a fresh start. $180,000 won't buy anything in this area, Tom protested. You're forcing us to downsize, to move to a lesser neighborhood. The irony of his complaint was not lost on me. Perhaps it's time to adjust your expectations to match your reality. Amanda moved from tears to threats. We'll fight this. We'll get lawyers. You can't just sell our home from under us. You can certainly try, I said, standing up. But Frank has assured me that legally, my position is unassailable. I own 70% of this house. I have the right to sell it. I handed Amanda the sealed letter. I've written everything here. My feelings, my reasoning, my hopes for the future. Read it when you're calmer. I don't want your letter, she spat, throwing it back at me. I want my house. It was never truly yours, I said sadly. Not in the ways that matter most. Not in appreciation for how it came to be yours. Not in respect for the sacrifices that built it. I moved toward the stairs. I'll be leaving tomorrow morning. I've already packed my things. Good, Amanda shouted after me. Leave, but don't expect to see your grandchildren again. Her words cut deeper than she could know, but I had anticipated this reaction. It was the price I would have to pay for doing what was necessary. The next morning, I loaded my few possessions into my car while the family was out. Amanda had taken the children to school early and not returned, clearly avoiding a goodbye. I left my house key on the kitchen counter, alongside copies of all the sale documents and a duplicate of my letter, in case she had destroyed the first one. For the next week, I heard nothing from them. I settled into my small apartment, arranging my photographs of Sarah, placing her potted plants on the balcony, trying to make the impersonal space feel like some version of home. Carol kept me updated on the sale process. The inspection had gone smoothly. The buyers were proceeding with their financing, though they had the cash to purchase outright if needed. Everything was on track for closing in 60 days as planned. 10 days after I moved out, Frank called to inform me that Amanda and Tom had consulted an attorney of their own. They're trying to contest the sale, he explained, but it won't go anywhere. The documentation is clear. They're just delaying the inevitable. A week later, I received a text message from Jackson, sent secretly from his tablet. Mom and Dad are really mad. They say we have to move. Is that because of you, Grandpa? I carefully composed my response. Sometimes adults disagree about important things. I love you and Lily very much, and I hope to see you soon. He didn't reply. 3 weeks after the sale announcement, Amanda finally called. Her voice was cold, controlled. The lawyer says we can't stop the sale, she stated without preamble. He says you have the legal right to do this to us. It wasn't what I wanted, Amanda, I said. But you left me no choice. We're your family, she countered. You always have a choice. Yes, I agreed. And you made yours when you decided to treat me as a source of income, rather than your father. There was a long silence. We need to discuss practical matters, she finally said. The buyers want to do a final walkthrough next week, and we need to talk about where our things are going. We had a brief, business-like conversation about logistics. No mention of reconciliation, no acknowledgement of her behavior, just the practical details of unraveling our lives from one another. The day before the scheduled closing, Amanda called again. Her voice had a different quality now, desperate rather than angry. Dad, we can't find anywhere to live. Everything in our price range island, not what we're used to. The children will have to change schools. Tom still hasn't found a good job. Can't we work something out? Maybe you could buy our share instead? Let us stay? The plea surprised me, but I had prepared for this possibility. The sale is proceeding, Amanda. The decisions that led here were made months ago, by all of us. Please, she begged, for the grandchildren. I've already made arrangements for Jackson and Lily, I told her. You'll find out tomorrow at the closing. She hung up without another word. The next day, we all met at the title company office. Amanda and Tom looked exhausted, defeated. They had clearly spent weeks searching unsuccessfully for housing that matched their expectations within their new budget constraints. The closing process was straightforward. The buyers, a young professional couple expecting their first child, were excited about the house. They signed their documents in a separate room, never meeting the family they were displacing. When it came time to distribute the proceeds, Frank presented Amanda and Tom with the final figures. After paying off their second mortgage of $220,000, the remaining amount was $620,000. Of that, I was entitled to 70%, or $434,000. Amanda's 30% came to $186,000. But then Frank slid an additional document across the table. Cruz has some further instructions regarding the distribution. The title company's conference room fell silent as Frank explained the additional documents I had prepared. Cruz has directed that his portion of the proceeds be divided as follows, Frank stated professionally. $100,000 will be placed in a trust for each of the grandchildren, Jackson and Lily, for their future education. The trusts will be managed by a neutral third-party trustee, accessible only for verified educational expenses. Amanda's eyes widened as Frank continued. Additionally, Cruz has allocated $134,000 to be placed in an escrow account designated specifically for Amanda and Tom to purchase a new family home. This account can only be used for a down payment and closing costs on a primary residence, not for any other purpose. Tom stared at the papers in disbelief. And the remaining $200,000? That remains with Cruz for his retirement needs, Frank confirmed. After all, he will need to support himself now that his original retirement plan of living with family has changed. Amanda looked at me, her expression a complex mixture of emotions. Why would you do this after everything that happened? Because you're still my daughter, I replied simply. And Jackson and Lily are still my grandchildren. This arrangement ensures they have educational opportunities and a stable home, regardless of our personal differences. So, you're controlling us even now, Tom muttered, though without much conviction. No, I corrected him. I'm ensuring that my life's work benefits my family in the ways I always intended. The house was never meant to be leveraged for luxury purchases or status symbols. It was meant to provide security and opportunity. Amanda was silent for several moments, then asked the question I had been waiting for. Where are we supposed to live in the meantime? The buyers want possession next week. This was the moment I had prepared for. The answer that would, as the title suggested, freeze her. I've arranged a 6-month lease on a 3-bedroom townhouse in Westridge Community, I explained. It's paid through November, giving you time to find a permanent home using the escrow funds. It's within the same school district, so the children won't need to change schools. Amanda's mouth opened slightly in shock. This was the freezing moment, referenced in the title. You've already found us a place to live? She stammered. Yes. It's not as large as the house, but it's clean, safe, and in a good neighborhood. The lease is in your name, with an option to extend if needed, though you would be responsible for rent after the initial 6 months. Tom looked stunned. I don't understand. Why would you help us after we treated you so poorly? I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully, because family isn't just about what we deserve from each other. It's about rising above disappointment, about choosing connection over resentment when possible. But you sold our house, Amanda said, though her accusatory tone had softened. I sold a house I legally owned after you made it clear I wasn't welcome in it, I corrected. But that doesn't mean I wanted to see my grandchildren homeless or their education disrupted. Frank provided them with the keys and address of the townhouse, along with details about the trusts and escrow account. As the meeting concluded, an uncomfortable silence fell over the room. I should go, I said, gathering my papers. The movers are scheduled for Saturday. I've arranged for a storage unit for anything that won't fit in the townhouse. As I stood to leave, Amanda suddenly asked, Will we see you again? The question held vulnerability I hadn't heard from her in years. That depends on you, I answered honestly. My door is always open to all of you, but there would need to be new boundaries, new understandings. She nodded slightly, the first acknowledgement that things had gone wrong and would need to be rebuilt differently. The following months were difficult. I settled into my apartment, focusing on volunteer work with a construction program that built homes for veterans. The physical labor was good for me, providing both purpose and connection with others. I made new friends, joined a grief support group for widowers, and slowly began building a life that wasn't defined solely by my identity as Amanda's father. For the first 2 months after the move, I heard nothing from Amanda or Tom. Through Jackson's occasional secret text messages, I learned they had moved into the townhouse and were always arguing about money. This saddened me, but didn't surprise me. Financial habits don't change overnight. Thanksgiving approached, my first major holiday alone since Sarah's death. I planned to volunteer serving meals at a community center rather than sit alone in my apartment with memories. 3 days before Thanksgiving, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Jackson and Lily standing there, Amanda waiting nervously by a car parked at the curb. Grandpa. Lily launched herself into my arms. We missed you so much. Jackson, trying to maintain his preteen dignity, offered a fist bump instead, but his smile was genuine. Mom said we could invite you for Thanksgiving, if you want to come. I looked over their heads at Amanda, who gave a small, tentative wave. This was an olive branch, however small. I would be honored, I told the children. Should I bring anything? Mom says just yourself, Jackson reported. And maybe your apple pie recipe. She tried to make it but says it wasn't as good as yours. That Thanksgiving was awkward, but civil. Tom was polite but distant. Amanda seemed caught between lingering resentment and genuine desire for reconciliation. The grandchildren, however, were unreservedly delighted to have me there, showing me every corner of their new home, catching me up on their lives. After dinner, while Tom took the children for ice cream, Amanda and I sat alone at the dining table with coffee. I read your letter, she finally said. The one you left the day you moved out. I didn't want to, but eventually, I did. I waited, giving her space to continue. You wrote about sacrifices, about you and Mom working so hard for that house. She twisted her coffee cup in her hands. I never saw it that way. The house was just always there, always ours. I never thought about how it came to be. That was partly our fault, I acknowledged. We wanted to protect you from worries. Perhaps we sheltered you too much from the realities. She nodded slowly. The townhouse is nice. Smaller, but nice. The kids have adjusted well. A pause. Tom found a job last month. Less money, but steady. I'm glad to hear that. We're learning to live differently, she continued. Budget apps, cooking at home. The escrow account for the new house. It's making us plan carefully. Research neighborhoods thoroughly. That's good, Amanda. She met my eyes directly for the first time. I'm sorry, Dad. Not for everything yet. I'm still angry about some things. But I'm sorry for how we treated you. You deserved better. It wasn't complete reconciliation, but it was a beginning. Over the following months, our relationship slowly mended. Weekend visits with the grandchildren became regular. Amanda and I established a new tradition of Sunday phone calls. Tom gradually thawed as their financial situation stabilized with his new job and more careful spending habits. By the following summer, they had found a modest 4-bedroom home in a good neighborhood, using the escrow funds exactly as intended. It was within their means, with a manageable mortgage they could afford on Tom's new salary. I attended their housewarming, bringing plants for the garden and tools for Tom's new interest in home maintenance. Amanda gave me a tour, pointing out proudly how they had chosen functionality over flash, quality over status. In the kitchen, I noticed a framed photograph I hadn't seen in years. Sarah and me on the day we signed the papers for the original house, standing proudly in front of it with a young Amanda between us. I found it in a box while unpacking, Amanda explained. I thought it should be displayed. That small gesture told me more about her changing perspective than any words could have. As I reflect now on this journey, I realize that what happened was necessary, painful as it was. Amanda needed to learn the value of what she had been given, not just the physical house, but the principles that had built it. Tom needed to discover that status without substance creates a house of cards that eventually collapses. And I needed to learn that true love sometimes requires difficult choices. The house I worked so hard for is gone now, belonging to a new family creating their own memories within its walls. But its value lives on in the education trusts for my grandchildren, in the more modest but debt-free home Amanda and Tom now occupy, and in the lessons we all learned about what truly makes a house a home. Family relationships are complex, fragile things. They can fracture under pressure, but can also heal with time, honesty, and forgiveness. The pain of betrayal never completely disappears, but it can be overshadowed by the joy of reconciliation. I think Sarah would be proud of where we've all landed. Not perfect, but growing. Not what we planned, but perhaps what we needed. What about you? Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that hurt someone you loved for their own good, or experienced a betrayal that eventually led to personal growth? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes, the hardest lessons teach us the most valuable truths about family, forgiveness, and finding peace.